Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to my channel on writing. I'm going to quit screwing around with my chair and quit making random noises. Please forgive the lackadaisical attitude I'm taking toward the videos. I'm serious about what I'm doing, but I'm not particularly serious about recording it. The reason being, if it's not going to actually improve the product, I usually don't bother with it. Whatever. I don't see title cards and music and intros as adding that much value to this process for you, so since it also doesn't add that much value to the process for me, let's just skip it. Now, what I wanted to start off with for the first real video, hopefully you didn't waste your time with the intro video, whatever, I'm sorry. For the first real video, I wanted to talk about my actual process. As you can see, I don't have a lot of the standard issue programs open. I have Word installed on this computer, but it's not even on my bar. No, there it is right there. See, I didn't even know where it was. I use Word primarily for work because people send me, I don't mean like work, writing work. I have a day job as a software engineer and people send me itineraries and schedules and all kinds of other inappropriate things in Word documents because reasons, but that's not really important here. I don't use Word for any portion of my writing process. Let's go over the tools that I do use really quickly. First off, the terminal. I'm not kidding, it's actually pretty important to me. I do a lot of stuff in here. The biggest reason I do a lot of stuff in the terminal is that my novel in its entirety is stored in a Git repository. You can see here this thing rewrite, that's the branch that I'm on. If you're not sure what Git is, the thing to check out is gitscm.org. I will try to remember to put a link into the video description. The reason that Git is important is basically this. If I want to view any prior version of this work, I can do that. I can go through every edit I have ever made, provided that I have committed that edit to the repository at some point. That means that no work is ever lost. I can add a scene, delete that scene, put the scene back in, modify the scene, and then go back to the very original version of the scene without ever copying and pasting a file or renaming anything or any of that other garbage that you have to do with Word. There are products on the market, and I can't remember their names because they don't matter to me, but there are products on the market that basically provide a convenient wrapper around Git for authors. I don't really believe in those because, in my opinion, anyone can learn to use at least the parts of Git that I use for writing. Obviously, in my day job as a software engineer, I use other far more complicated features, but in writing, I basically do this. That's it. That's how I commit work to Git. Get out is an alias for something. I swear there's something in here. There it is, out. It's an alias for a long command that basically just adds everything that I've done since the last time I committed and pushes it up. It's sometimes jokingly referred to as git fire, as in the building is on fire and I have to leave. That's pretty much it. So I've just been tapping around in the terminal to look at what I was doing last. The command I just used is git diff, which shows me the changes that I've made since the last commit. As you can see, I deleted a paragraph and, well, it looks like I actually edited this paragraph. Yeah, I added a sentence to the end of the paragraph and then added 2 more lines of dialogue since the last time I committed. But this is the kind of thing that you get with Git. You get the, well, for one thing, you get this convenient little yellow dot that says, hey, I've changed it. But now, I mean, it goes way beyond that. You get the same thing in this editor, but we were talking about the terminal, so we'll come to that here in a minute. Other stuff that I use the terminal for includes word count, believe it or not. Now, this is not an option on Windows, but on Linux and on Mac OS, which is what this is, obviously, you have a program called word count. The command is WC. You provide an argument in this style. This is telling word count to count all of the files in the chapters folder. Word count spits out this output here. It's relatively useful. It's not great, but it beats having to look it up the hard way, right? So we have a word count of 16,241 words. This is the number of lines. This thing over here is the number of characters. I don't really care about either of those metrics, so it's pretty useless. Because I am a software engineer, I have customized my tools to a degree. I have certainly customized my workflow. And what I use to count words is a thing called ncount, which works basically the same way but provides different output. Specifically, ncount counts, or it is designed to count, the number of actual words in an .nv file, which is a text file that ends in .nv instead of .txt. I'm using Markdown format, but I don't like the way that my text editor formats Markdown format, so I changed the extension. I'm sorry. The difference in output here is as follows. Number one, the word count appears here first thing. I probably should change the format so that the word count appears on the left-hand margin and then the file name appears on the right-hand, so that word count is the very first thing visible. Yeah, whatever, I can change it to do whatever I want. The second metric here is not line count, but rather paragraph count. The difference being this thing here that I'm highlighting is a line, but it's totally blank, who cares? This is a paragraph. Well, I only care about paragraphs. And this thing in parentheses is the longest paragraph in that section. Whatever. I like to track my long paragraphs because one of the weaknesses of my style has always been very long paragraphs, and by very long I mean 120, 150 words when the average length is more like 60. So yeah, as you can see, my longer paragraphs tend to cluster in the 80 to 90 word range now that I've been tracking. Now when I say that ncount is designed to count the number of words in a file, I mean that it doesn't necessarily do a great job. Here, we'll talk about what it does wrong here in just a second. Let's talk about what it does right first. Specifically, it gets these word counts correct. 2264 for chapter 1, section 1 versus 2256 for chapter 1, section 1. Word count is overestimating by a significant margin, and the reason that I say that is that ncount, unlike word count, does not count comments like this one. So this comment can't appear in any of my output. Whenever I format this to be printed, this comment gets ignored by my formatter. And anyways, it's not going to appear in the text of the book, so why count the number of words in it? So yeah, ncount skips that. And I think that's actually, well, no, there's one other thing it skips. It skips this stuff, which is basically just metadata for the scene. Chapter 2, Scene 1, Type 1 scene, character name, and the version count. Don't ask why. It's labeled as version 2 because there is actually still a version 1 in the file tree. It's down here. Scraps 2.1 would be the previous version. Anyway. So obviously it's a little bit different from what you would do with Word, but it's fairly convenient depending on exactly how you feel about your setup. That pretty much covers the usefulness of the terminal, other than, actually compiling my word count program, which is this thing right here. It's 91 lines of Rust. Fairly simple stuff, honestly. This does not have a license online, but if anybody's interested, I can add a license file so that you can feel confident in downloading and using it yourself. But I don't care. You can use it all you want to. The license that I would probably add would be either the unlicensed or the DWTF license. Do what the fuck you want with it. Yeah. Either one of those would be fine. If not for the fact that other countries don't have a concept of the public domain, I would be perfectly fine with just putting the program into the public domain. But I forget which countries, but there are countries in the world that are a little bit worse off than the United States in terms of their copyright laws, that it just wouldn't help you to have a program in the public domain. It would still not technically be legal for you to use it without a license. So moving on from that, let's talk about this editor. This is not anything weird. It's just a little bit weird for an author. I use this a lot for practically everything I do at work that doesn't directly involve Visual Studio. This is called Visual Studio Code. It's kind of a lighter weight version of Visual Studio that is intended just as a text editor, but can be set up for any number of tasks. It integrates this search thing, this file tree thing, this I don't use this for anything, but whatever. You can debug your programs with it. You can install all kinds of extensions. I have some installed, but none for this particular purpose. But basically, it lets you type, and it just lets you type. And that's important to me because that means that my output looks fine whenever I view it in Git. Whenever I look at the file history in Git, it's meaningful, which you don't get with a file history for, say, a Word document in Git, because a Word document is actually a binary file, whereas this is just a text file. So there's that advantage, but it's not ideal. It's far from ideal, as a matter of fact. Like I said, I don't like the way that Word handles Markdown files. I don't know why, but Markdown files don't have the ability to set a soft wrap at a given line length. As you can see right here, my lines wrap here. Specifically, they wrap at 80 characters. This is an 80 column line length. So that's great. I'll talk about why I think that's important here in just a second, but first let's go over how I've managed to get that, even though Markdown files don't really support that. What I have in my repository is, well, a lot of stuff. I mean, obviously, this repository is 6 months old now. There's a lot of stuff in it, but I have this VS Code settings JSON, and what I did was I set word wrap to word wrap column mode. I set the word wrap column to 80, and I've also turned off word-based suggestions so that it doesn't try to give me autocomplete options based on words already found in the file, because I just found that reduced the performance of the editor to a noticeable degree. And by noticeable, I mean I type 80 to 120 words a minute when I'm actually typing, which is not much of the time at all if we're talking about writing a novel or even programming. It doesn't involve much actual typing. It's mostly staring at the screen and scratching your beard, but whatever. I found that it made the editor less less responsive, so I turned it off just because I was annoyed at that. It doesn't really matter. The other thing does matter though, because with the file extension set to something other than .md, I'm able to turn on this column wrap thing. Now we're going to get to something that I think is actually kind of important. Wrapping at 80 columns means that I can get a feel on every computer I edit on for how long a paragraph is just by looking at it, just by seeing the number of lines in it and how much space it takes up on the screen. Now, under normal circumstances, the length of a paragraph on the screen depends on how wide the window is, and I hate that. It made it very difficult for me to literally get a feel for how I was doing. I write by the seat of my pants. I think most of us do, and that's fine when you're using a typewriter or when you're using Word, because your screen width, so to speak, is actually kind of related to a physical artifact, that being a page. And that being the case, you can say, okay, this paragraph has taken up a quarter of a page. It's clearly too long, but that's not an option when you're talking about a text editor like this one. So I've used the column wrap option to get around that. Specifically, some rules of thumb that I've been using. An 80 column line is 16 words long. Now this note, not really anywhere near true, but it's kind of a good rule of thumb, because in publishing, a word is 5 characters. That's how they measure that. It's just an arbitrary number that they thought worked well. And the reason that they do that is that they use the word count to estimate the length in pages of the book. And for that reason, it's not important that it be precise. So here's an example line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 words in that line. Here's another line. I think this one will have a higher count. We'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 words in this line. So it's approximate, as I said, but it's fairly reliable. You can get a pretty good guess. It looks to me like, because I tend to use long words, I suppose, it's kind of an underestimate for me, or overestimate. I guess I use short words? No, long words. Whatever. Point being, it's a good guess. It's a good rule of thumb that basically I've been saying one paragraph is about 5 lines. 5 lines is, I have to get out my calculator now because I'm a programmer and I don't do math myself. I have computers do that kind of crap because screw math. It takes an embarrassingly long time to do that. 5 times 16 should be 80. Yeah, okay. So 80 words. A 5-line paragraph is about standard. This one is 6 lines? No, 7 lines, counting this little thing at the end. But I usually don't count those because they usually end up very short, and who cares? Anyway, that's the idea behind all of that. What else can we discuss? Oh, the lack of spell check. I'm going to go ahead and say that I think that's a good thing. I have a spell checker installed on this computer. Obviously, I also have access to Word, but I don't use any of those things. And by spell checker installed, I mean that I have a terminal spell checker. So I could use the terminal here to run spell check on this file, but I don't. The main reason being that my spelling is good, I don't really make mistakes on a regular basis, and nobody cares, basically. Like, I mean, literally nobody cares about the mistakes that I do make, so I just skip that part. But the reason that I don't think it's important to spell check as you go is that if you are running spell check as you go, you're constantly interrupting your flow of thought to go back and take squigglies out from under some word that in the grand scheme of things just doesn't matter. So screw that. Let's just move on. Which is, speaking of, maintaining a flow, the ability to add comments in line, I think is pretty nice, just for exactly the same reason. Obviously, if other people were editing the file, they could do the same thing. It would be difficult then to discriminate between theirs and mine, but as a general rule, I guess they could put in like a title or something here that says by so-and-so, and it'd be, same difference. So it's a little bit less convenient to add comments to this file than it would be to add them to a Word file, but you gotta take the good with the bad. And overall, I'd say that this is a good thing. So we've discussed the kind of the back end of it. We've discussed word counts. We've discussed spell checking. We've discussed line lengths and paragraphs and other crap that probably nobody cares about. Let's talk about how you generate usable output from this. So here we go. Say I want to show someone this in progress version of scene 1. Well, sending them the file is not an option, and I'll tell you why. Basically, it's impossible to explain to any human being how to read this file. I don't know why. You send it to another programmer and they just open it up in Notepad, or more commonly in Visual Studio Code or Atom or whatever their editor of choice is, and that's it. That's, simple to them. They say, okay, I like to use Vim, so VI chapters and then CO2 blah 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 blah, and it's open. That's the whole process. But for normal people, it doesn't work. There's no program on their computer that will automatically open a .env, and therefore they are helpless. So what you do is this. there you go. There's this program called Pandoc, and I don't know how they named that, but whatever. You install it using, at least on Mac, you install it using Brew, I think. I don't remember how I did it, but there, okay. Okay, that, yeah, right there. Pandoc right there. So I've installed that using Brew, and actually it works really well. All it does is it reads this file and prints it out to this other file, excerpt.pdf, because I named it that, and it's a little bit more in depth than that, but what it does is it guesses what type of file it's reading based on the format of the file, which is why I'm able to feed it a .nv and it still reads it correctly. And the output is determined based on the extension of the output file name. So it takes in an NV file and spits out a formatted .pdf file using the standard formatter. I could supply some alternative style sheet for it to use. I just don't see any reason to for this particular purpose. You know what I mean? Who's going to look at this? It's not going to be an editor. So, you know, I print this thing off and I take it to my workshop and it works fine. It's not necessarily ideal. It'd be nice if it were double spaced, but then I'd have to have like actual tabs. So, you know, like I said, take with the good with the bad. On the upside, it has very large margins on all sides. So this means that they can scroll whatever they want to out to the side here, and you know, they got plenty of room for it. To get the entire book printed out that way is a little bit more complicated. You do like what? ls so that would be all of chapter 1, that search right there. You'd pipe that command into Pandoc. Don't ask what piping is, but you know, you build up a pipeline and that will then print out the book. I have written a script that will do that for you, at least for a certain case. Specifically for an older version of the draft that I've been working on. It's fine. The only thing that's weird in here is there's another program that I wrote called Novelize that adds some metadata to the text stream so that Pandoc can add some extra stuff to my document when it outputs it. So, in a nutshell, there's my workflow. As I said, setting up Git is kind of a separate issue. If you want to know more about that, there's gitscm.org. I think. I don't know. I'll check before I put it in the description. Is there anything else I should cover that I do that's kind of strange? I don't think there is. If there is, you can certainly point it out to me and I will attempt to cover that in a subsequent video of some kind. Anyway, until then, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you next time.